Welcome everyone. We'll get started. I just want to introduce our physician and we'll get going, okay? It's my honor to introduce Dr. Qazi, a transplant nephrologist and head of the Kidney Pancreas Transplant Program at Keck School of Medicine at USC. Dr. Qazi has received nearly $2 million in research grants and has several other studies recently submitted for approval. Educated in India, Dr. Qazi was consistently one of the academic leaders among his medical school classmates, and he continues to demonstrate his talents and devotion to medicine as an educator, researcher, and practitioner.
Thank you so much. That's a really outdated bio sketch I got to fix, but that's okay. I'm still the same. Folks, it's really an honor to be here. I do this for a living, but then it's such a good reset every time I come in and hear patient stories and talk to patients. I've always said a patient is called a patient because you guys are so patient. So for me, it is really an honor to be here to do a little bird's eye view of sort of like what's on the horizon. And we've come a long way. This is Dr. Smogorowski, one of the smartest men I know. He's a fellow nephrologist, originally from Poland. You could ask him what the best coffee is or like the best book is. I call it the smog check. Everybody calls him Dr. Smog. We're in LA. There's a lot of smog. I call it the smog check. So this is the Polish soccer team being scored on, and Dr. Smog is Polish. Why would he be happy with this thing when Poland's getting scored on? And the reason is number 17, Ivan Klasnik, is a recipient of 2 kidney transplants, one from his dad, one from his mom. And this is sort of testimony to where we have basically come from not too far long ago, because end-stage renal disease at one point was a death sentence. And it wasn't until 1945 that Dr. Bilkoff was the first sort of inventor of the dialysis machine. It had about 50 yards of Nathan hot dog casing. It had a Ford engine, and the first 15 people that were put on this machine died. I mean, you would go to jail running a trial like that in 2024. And according to Dr. Eli Friedman, my mentor in Brooklyn, because the 16th patient was in New York City, she survived, and according to him, the first words when she woke up was, "I want a divorce." So she, we cleared up uremia to these first successful dialysis machine that resulted in a divorce. But the truth is, we have really come a long way, not just on dialysis, on transplant as well. These were the first identical twins that the kidney transplant was actually performed on. It was not too long ago. It was 1954, and it was called the Christmas Day Miracle. Shortly after, in 1962, the first successful deceased donor kidney transplant was performed. So when we look at dialysis and transplant, we always have to wonder, what is, we were just talking about somebody being on a transplant, what does a transplant compare to dialysis? And of course, we know that it's a better quality of life. You don't have to be attached to a machine. You don't have to be wondering if it's a Monday or a Wednesday or a Thursday. So the quality of life we always knew was better, but it wasn't until some recent studies and some that came out in the early 2000s that actually showed us the impact of having a functioning kidney that is dumping out all the waste products. And you can see that in what we call the survival advantage. How many more years does transplant add compared to what dialysis is? And as you will realize, if you are a young diabetic, you are likely to benefit the most, because diabetes obviously not only does is a microvascular disease, impacts every organ, puts people at risk of infection. So being a young diabetic, it was almost like 20 years of life got added on compared to 10 years. So even later in life, there was a survival advantage, which has resulted in us, until 2001 and 2003, when some of these papers came in, we just knew that people were better. But these then started to prove, and again, this has been a constant theme, and we've continued to improve it. We're going to be talking about transplant care later in the afternoon. But there is a shortage of organs. There is a crisis, and about 17 people die waiting for an organ transplant, and these waits just keep growing longer. And I'm like, you're fine, come on in, grab a seat, very informal. We'll wait until you guys get in. So the truth is, there is an enormous amount of weight that folks have to go through, and this is on the that side shows like folks that were listed in 2001 still had to wait about 7 years for blood group O to get a transplant. You can almost double these in some places like Southern California, where folks have to wait so much more before they get a kidney transplant. And so not only is this sort of like a big sort of disease burden, which I call, we have the Honda epidemic: hypertension, obesity, non-compliance, diabetes, atherosclerosis. All these things are resulting in more CKD. More CKD is progressing, resulting in folks going on a transplant. But there's another aspect to it, like which is sort of like the costs associated with it. So you and I are working, and at age 65, our Medicare is supposed to kick in. But kidney disease is the only condition. If you're a U.S. citizen, if you work, you become eligible for Medicare even if you're 27 years old. It's like the only organ in the body that's Canadian. You get universal health care immediately, right? You are eligible for Medicare when you have kidney failure and you qualify for that. But as a consequence, even though it accounts for only 1% of the Medicare population, the rest of the Medicare population is still folks that are older than 65 years of age. It accounts for an enormous amount of money, about $42 billion in 2013. And as a result, there was an executive order passed in 2017, which looked at, where can we basically make these changes? Like $42 billion is a lot of money that is happening for something that might be preventable. Of course, there are rare kidney diseases, but the things that are causing kidney disease are still your diabetes and hypertension. So the 2017 executive order basically set up a lot of goals, and it's created a lot of excitement, and some of that you can see is palpable in the meeting, in the opening session that we had over here. And 2020 to 2030 is now being labeled as the decade of the kidney, with the goal of bringing folks together. And this is sort of like an important slide because all of this has sort of happened in the last 5 to 10 years. And centered right over there is the patient voice that you guys are part of, you guys are driving, and thank you for doing that because it has resulted on both sides of the Atlantic. This is sort of the European side, that is the American side. All these entities, societies are coming in together, again, to some extent, driven by, sort of not only sort of the costs associated with managing chronic kidney disease, the implication it has on patient lives. As a result of all these, as I mentioned, it's called the decade of the kidney. There's a lot of impetus on how to prevent progression of chronic kidney disease, how to do early detection, and these are like sort of like talks in themselves, and I'm sure some of the talks that are going in parallel are addressing some of these. And again, this is sort of a bit of a bird's eye view, but again, we want to prevent chronic kidney disease. We want to get people transplanted fast enough, and the ones that are basically waiting on dialysis, we want to minimize the disruption dialysis creates. So those are our goals. The goal is until we can get them to get us a kidney transplant, what do we do to make it like so seamless and normal that it is sort of like an easy transition? And a lot of that basically comes from an advancement in the technology. You heard earlier today that sometimes, it is hard to, as clinicians, to keep up with what is the latest cutting edge and how we can bring it back to our kidneys. And by and large, we, on the kidney side, have kind of been a bit, we've been passive about it. And we were just talking about it. It's very frustrating to me. And honestly, 20 years ago, when I was a resident, I thought like the nephrologists were the smartest people. But then when I went into nephrology, I'm like, my God, there isn't a whole lot that we can offer these patients. So very quickly, I went to do transplant. But now it is such an interesting time in nephrology. So I just want to let everybody know that a lot of this is because of sort of like all these technologies that are sort of like exploding. We're trying to bring them into our sort of like into our disease states. And nanotechnology is like, when I was a kid, you had a boom box, right? Now you have like tiny little devices in your ear. So how do you like scale down something that was so big into something tiny? What can we do to like shrink that dialysis machine that is, one of these big machines that you have to roll in? So that's nanotechnology, cell growth techniques, where we want to like have cells that even if we don't have an entire kidney transplant, can we get some of the most important cells and sort of have them engineered in a way that our dialysis machine are also doing something that the kidney does? Because as you know, the kidney has more to do than just the fluid balance and electrolyte balance. It helps us with anemia, with blood pressure, with vitamin D. So there are all these other things that the kidneys can do, and then we have the bioreactors, which is sort of like a fusion of all these things. So advancement in these technologies have gotten us closer to what an implantable bioartificial kidney could do, and then also kidney regeneration. If there's an injury, obviously, I was trying to open up a coconut, I cut my hand, it's still healing, but so we regenerate, right? So what can we do to normalize regeneration to the best we can, where the tissue looks back the way it was, despite all the injury that has happened? And that is key because these are sort of things that will help us to get to the goal. And like many things that I am talking about, obviously they have to be approved at the FDA, and they're in preclinical stage, but eventually are likely to be the ones that are going to get us to have as close a normal kidney function as is possible. So the idea is, what can we do to have like either, instead of having to go to a dialysis unit, have something that is an artificial wearable kidney, or is like a transplant that we can implant, right? So where are we at this? Again, Dr. Bill Kolf, I've met him in Brooklyn. He was like an amazing guy. I think at that time he was already 90. And it was just amazing because he was like, I was like, well, is he really going to be able to do it? Wearing this big device on him, like it was the first wearable artificial kidney that he was working on. And my mentor, Dr. Eli Friedman in Brooklyn, he would always bring him in to kind of like have us hear the first time he created a dialysis machine. And again, some of these things are, it takes a while to get them because at that time we didn't have the engineering, we didn't have the techniques, and this is a lot more easier now because we have some of those techniques. And again, the wearable artificial kidney became a reality in 1986. And this was followed by human trials in 2015, where we, for the first time, tested, especially in the acute kidney injury model. And these are sort of like the ones that are out there, and the mechanism is either they are going to be a peritoneal base, so I'm going to show you a couple of those, but these are sort of the ones that are in the pipeline that are looking. And again, the idea is the technologies that we have like silicone membranes that can be sort of like simulated to almost be like a kidney. So all these things are happening, which are helping us create devices like the Vincenza wearable device, which is sort of like a PD. And again, instead of having to be plugged into a big PD machine, you have something that is going to be a little small device which sort of has the ability to use minimal solvent, regenerate on itself. And again, these techniques which are making it possible to minimize sort of like the size of some of those devices and make it more acceptable. This is another one from Singapore. They've already manufactured it. You can't buy it yet, but again, these are the things that they do have a US-based affiliation. So these are things that are going to be coming in down very shortly. And to some extent, as I mentioned, the ability to integrate some of those things with the cell biology, with the cell technique. And this was sort of like a landmark paper, and sort of like the kidney project at UCSF is driven by this as a combination of more refined cell technology and the silicone nanopore membranes coming in together. The idea being we're also incorporating cells into a cartridge that is doing, so there is an implantable bioartificial kidney, and we implant it the same way that we do a kidney transplant, where the blood can come in, come out, and then generate urine, which could be connected to the bladder. So it has like a hemo cartridge, which is managing the fluid part of it, and the bioreactor part of it has the cells. And the cells have been tested. We've tested the viability of some of these things. So these are things that are advancing at a very fast rate. And some animal models have been done. This is sort of like it being implanted into an animal, into a pig, and kind of like assess. So these are things that are going to be evolving and helping us be able to get us devices that are manageable, that are, our lives have changed with the cell phones. I mean, wasn't too long ago. I remember the first time where I was looking at a GPS in Buffalo, New York. I'm like, the guy's like, oh yeah, I can ask him to look Chinese food and it'll be able to. I'm like, are you serious? No way. That happened in our lifetime, right? You know, we used to have to go to call collect. Maybe not many of you out here, but you know, so things have changed in our lifetime. So these are technologies that are now being incorporated where we can downsize, minimize, and sort of like not have it be so disruptive until we can finesse out some of these techniques. And these are our bioengineering ones. How do we sort of regenerate a kidney? How do we create a kidney? How do we like heal a kidney that has healed? And a lot of these techniques are resulting in sort of a lot of grants that have been submitted to many universities, including our institution at Keck USC. Called the Synthetic Project. So every year, and I encourage you to like look it up. It's called the UKRO, University Kidney Research Organization, and there is sort of like this gala event that we have. I mean, I'm from Los Angeles. You should come there too, boss. It is totally down your street at the Beverly Hilton. And so I went there right before COVID, and then I see like everybody dressed up. It was like great. I'm like, whoa, we really did good this year. So I go to them. I'm like, excuse me here. I was trying to register. I'm like, I'm here with the UKRO. They're like, oh yeah. You guys are in the corner over there. This is the breast cancer awareness. I'm like, of course, the poor kidney is in the back in the corner. And, you know, but the thing is, like, a lot has changed now, and we as a result of some of those, we have like the Kidney Synthetic Project at USC, which goes along some of these lines. How do we grow a kidney? You know, and again, some of this is like whole kidney bioengineering. And then there is like engineering on the marginal kidneys, because a kidney from a deceased donor that might have had like medical problems, diabetes, hypertension or something, can that be engineered enough so that we could, in the end, transplant more kidneys? So the part that I was talking about first was like getting us devices that would minimize the disruption of our life, give us the function that a kidney does, but eventually want to have complete whole organ that can completely be what a kidney is supposed to do. So these are sort of like some of the techniques that are really at the forefront of getting us to a kidney transplant. And I don't want to go into the details, but there have been studies where they've been able to use the mouse embryonic stem cells and be able to generate nephrons to have what we call a miniature organoid, and not so much on the human side. So we're lacking on the science on that, but you know, progressing very rapidly. And then when they use these kidney organoids and transplanted them onto the renal capsule of an animal, they were able to get, you know, some further differentiation, vascularization, and even though there wasn't any sort of like an anastomosis to where the urine would go, again, preliminary stages of where we are getting into the bioengineering of being able to create some of these things. So the other things are like they take a cadaveric rat kidney, they kind of clean it out, decellularize it, and then they're able to put up like human umbilical cord endothelial cells, which are then able to generate. So again, techniques that I just want you guys to be familiar about some of the things that are up on the horizon about where we can result in, you know, all of this starts with animal models. And I know my son's a big animal right activist. So, but it does, some of this science does happen, which leads us on to like some of these advances that we have seen. So again, with the other techniques that we have are 3D bioprinting. We cannot generate transplantable kidneys with that, but we can understand modeling. Like when we're talking about FSGS or membranous, we have to like simulate a disease that looks like it so we can test new therapies on it. So some of these advances are sort of like helping us understand, you know, and model it. And then we also have other techniques that may not be able to give us an entire organ, but are able to give us organoids that help us understand some of the biology. So all these techniques are really kind of like advancing. There's some other techniques called the blastocyst complementation, where they cause an animal to not have a particular set of organs. They add things on. So obviously there's something called the chimerism, and these techniques eventually basically lead on to us getting more organs, like, you know, sort of like the foundation of what xenotransplant did. Two of the things that I just quickly want to mention are called a kidney on a chip. So they sort of like almost simulate what the structure of the kidney is. So we have the filters, the glomerulus, we have the tubules. So they can put these on, and then these could be added on to the cartridge that I showed you to again simulate the functionality of a kidney. So again, just to sort of summarize, all these things are helping us. The most important things are be able to generate organs for us through xenotransplantation. So I showed you like these were like trying to build up a kidney from scratch, but also we every day right now when I'm talking to you, I'm going to get organ offers of how somebody died. And then I have to like figure out, I've never met the donor, but I have to accept that kidney based on what I think their health is. And as a society, we're not as healthy. So we have folks dying not knowing they had hypertension, dying in an overdose and having had acute kidney injury because they were in a bathroom stall nobody knew for like a day, but they were young, and so we're having to use some of these kidneys and all that. So what can we do to like basically sort of like minimize whatever damage has happened during that time? And that is where we try to engineer what we call marginal kidneys. It's a word that's kind of phasing out. We don't want to call them marginal kidneys anymore, but there are techniques that are being used that can potentially expand it. And the one that I'm kind of like really interested is the normothermic, where we are trying to normalize some of these injuries that happen. When you're injured, your kidney takes a back seat because nature didn't intend us to go to the bathroom when we were sick. So like the kidney flow, blood flow goes down, so it is more susceptible to injury. So how can we fix this? And then the most fascinating one is a mitochondrial transplant. And as you will notice with the genetic testing that is happening, we were uncovering a lot of mitochondrial conditions that might have some etiology in the dysfunction. And so the mitochondrial transplant is you basically take a mitochondria that were not injured and you kind of like remove them and infuse them, and there's all these different places that it's finding its utility, but something again that might be used down in the future. All right, so the next one is xenotransplantation, which basically means transplanting a kidney from another animal. And you heard about it, it sort of was in the news in the last, it's kind of been in the news for the last 2 years now, but it just really took on since last month. And it started out in 2022 when University of Maryland did the first heart transplant. But it kind of became a bit of a scandal because once the guy went on the news, then they realized that he had murdered somebody or something like that, and the family recognized him, so it wasn't like the best PR. It kind of got, it was the first person that got a heart transplant apparently had a serious crime committed to, so it became a news on its own. It ended up, instead of being in Science, it ended up being on TMZ or something like that. So, but then in July 2023, this was when they took a deceased, there was a deceased donor that a pig kidney was sort of attached to see what the functionality would be, and it was a 10 gene edited, because the concern with xenotransplantation is, are we going to transmit any infections that might be dangerous, that we don't have treatment for, we don't have antivirals for, antifungals for? Could there be? So if you look, these were sort of raised in a pathogen-free facility. It's been done. It's a lot of work is being done. And a lot of attention to detail, because there's very little room for error on this. So 4 genes were knocked out, 6 human genes were added on. So you could see how nicely the creatinine came down, the creatinine clearance went up. And this is sort of like where the proof of concept got established, because it was a kidney from a pig put on a person who was a brain dead. The person was going to be dead anyway, and it was sort of like the first way they donated their life to science. And so this was sort of like done, and this was the proof that you could make this happen, and the creatinine came down. So these are sort of like the places that are kind of looking into it: Alabama, NYU, Penn, Maryland, as I mentioned, and the Mass General. You might have heard about this. This happened last month. Was last month? Yeah, almost. It was the first patient that was transplanted with a pig kidney. and the kidney had the CRISPR technology had been used, and 69. I showed you the first one had 10 genes edited. This one had 69 genes edited. Yeah, I told you my son's an animal activist. So just so you guys better get used to this, okay? This was the animal that that's been created, and as I mentioned, 69 gene edits. Now the 69 gene edits have, like, many of them are to prevent the viral infections. The other ones are to prevent the rejection, because there is a glucose molecule, the galactose molecule, that can incite rejection that has to be edited out. And then we also want to make sure that the kidney is not going to get thrombosed. So a lot of these things, all of these techniques are kind of like in trying to sort of cutting down the barriers that might have existed in the transplantation of these organs, because the feasibility of just generating an organ and transplanting it and giving somebody normal life obviously is the most attractive part of this. And the immunosuppressive regimen that was used in this situation was essentially
So can that one pig give 2 kidneys?
Yes.
So 2 people can get?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then this is sort of like another investigational sort of medication that's used. I just want to show you the timeline. So as of April 22, 24, that kidney had been going on for at least 3/16/24 was the transplant, and 4/22/24 the patient was still doing okay. So that's about 2 weeks ago. So again, this thing is really advancing fast. Since then, they have had like meetings with the FDA. There's a liver program, a cardiac transplant program. So the feasibility of being able to do this on a big scale, it just takes it to the next level. I'm sorry.
How do you get into that?
How do you?
How did he get that?
How did he get that?
Yeah.
Oh, so
how did he get lucky enough to get that?
I think he was registered with one of these programs.
Okay.
So if all of them do have information you can contact. And again, still early days. That said, it's gone really fast. This is April 4th,
Yeah.
2024. New Jersey woman who basically received a kidney transplant and an LVAD. So she had both heart failure but she was not a heart transplant candidate. So just a month ago, she's now received an LVAD on April 4th, and about a month ago, a pig kidney transplant on April 12th, 2024. And again, the previous one that I showed you was by a company called eGenesis. This is by United Therapeutics. So the space is really, we're not even, honestly, we haven't even kept track of what's been going on, and some of this is hush hush because those guys are like kind of trying to be the first among themselves between Maryland. It literally they're like trying to outdo each other and all that, which is great. But it's like you go to these meetings, they put their protocol for like 1 minute, and then the next minute that they cut it off. They don't want the other people to know what exactly is going on.
I tried calling and they wouldn't tell me.
Yeah, now
they were just like. We're not telling anybody anything.
Yes, yeah. You can imagine. It's kind of like, but I think you keep calling them. Yeah. If not, call me. I'll collect you to them.
Because they've told me that it was inhumane to get another kidney. So they wouldn't give me a kidney. It's not inhumane to take a pig kidney.
Wait, who's telling you it's inhumane? Like,
I go to UAB. I go to UAB, and they told me it was not right to take another kidney from somebody knowing that the kidney will fail again.
Okay, we'll talk after this.
Exactly. Even if it's a voluntary donor?
Yes.
Really? Okay, we'll talk more.
I'm just keeping the kidney.
That's why we have this meeting. And it's my first time like you, man. I'm a Buffalo Bills, though.
You mean they better take a deceased donor than a live donor if it's going to reoccur?
I guess so. Or they don't want to take anything.
They don't want to
take
take
anything.
That should be the decision of the donor.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Ultimately,
100%.
because I'm her donor.
Because live
And I'll give my
donors
kidney to who I want to give it to.
Exactly.
What a waste of a kidney.
Because statistically it lasts longer in a live donor, correct,
Yeah.
than a deceased?
Yes, so without knowing the
Yeah.
specifics of what it is, I mean, I don't want to Alabama is a good
Yeah.
program, so I just want to see why they would say that. But anyway, I mean, you'll be surprised. It's called the Ronald Reagan Trust but Verify. You gotta. Okay, so that said, I had like this undergrad student like, can I do a project? Can I do a project? I'm like, your dad's a nephrologist. Why don't you go ask all the dialysis patients if they would take a transplant from a pig kidney? This was before I knew this was happening. So this study, it's accepted. We're presenting this at the American Transplant Congress next month. But it was like we asked all the patients, and about a third of the patients said they did not want to take, they would not take a kidney from a pig. From a pig donor. But since then, we have now had all these things happen, so I'm going to have to repeat all of this to see now it changes, but it did get accepted, so we're going to be presenting it next month in Philadelphia. And again, so it's a very rapidly changing, I just want to make sure I call myself short story long, that I'm not like...
25 minutes before questions.
Okay, very good. So the bottom line is we have a shortage of organs. What do? We increase the donor pool and we reduce the discard of potentially usable organs. And no, I'm not suggesting that we take their kidneys. I am just sort of suggesting, what an important, how important it is to get the word out. Because there was this show in the Netherlands called the Donor Show, and I don't know if is anyone aware of this show? Okay, so the lady over here wanted to donate a kidney, but she's like, you know what? I want to hear why I should donate a kidney to you. So it's kind of like The Bachelorette, but instead of getting the rose, you get a kidney. So the people had to like explain to her why they should donate a kidney. It made a lot of buzz. Even Fox News was talking about it. This is wrong. People were on both sides. It was like a debate. Should it be allowed? Should it not be allowed? At the end of it, people came out, the producers came out, and they said that this was all fake. This was just to increase organ donation awareness. Next day, the number of people that signed up to be organ donors went up like 250% and all that stuff. So the impact of, the Kardashians are there. They're doing whatever they're doing for the world, but I think it is so important to get the word about like how it does impact people. I think I'd be depressed if I wasn't a kidney transplant guy, because it is the only place where somebody donates a kidney that doesn't know the person, doesn't care who you are, doesn't care what your beliefs are, and makes a difference in somebody else's. So donors are heroes, especially the deceased donors, because they've never known who the person is. So. With that said, I have to explain everything in emojis, so I have my kidney emojis when I explain to the patient, because there is something called a kidney donor profile index, which sort of is a big word for the patient, but that's sort of like the way we expect how long a kidney is going to last. And so many people don't want to take a kidney transplant because they're like, oh, I want a kidney that is sort of a low KDPI, which is this happy kidney with, really good. And as a result, many people are on the list for a longer time because maybe they didn't understand the impact of taking a kidney like that. So as a result, we now have to understand getting this kidney. You may be waiting longer because first, if you need 2 organs, you get a priority for that. Pediatric get a priority for that. Time on dialysis. So you might be ending up suffering the consequences of dialysis because you're waiting for a kidney that might take you longer, especially for us in Southern California. So, and in France, they looked at it. My friend Alex Lupi published this paper, which said that about 62% of the kidneys discarded in the United States could have been transplanted in France. So this created a lot of buzz. We started like, why are we discarding all these kidneys? And a lot of this is sort of like changed into like looking at what kind of kidneys are transplant centers taking. So if you are on the transplant list, it's very important you understand what your transplant rate of your center is. If you had 100 people on the list, what percentage are they transplanting? What percentage are they taking what are called hard to place kidneys? Hard to place kidneys are like 100 transplants, and 100 people were 100 folks were passed on before they got a kidney. 100 transplant centers may have passed it, and somebody put a kidney in them. So if you go to the website, the SRTR, and you look up at the program, page 23 has what percentage of folks are being hard to place kidney at a center. And that's important because I analyzed this with my student, and we looked at the transplant centers. Only about 8.5% of the US centers were doing hard to place kidneys that were more than a third of their, if they did 100, which ones were doing more than a third of them. And most of them had great outcomes. So again, there are like all these things, to your point, like it should be the patient that is deciding whether they want to take a kidney or not. Like this stigma of like, you're okay in taking a pig transplant, somebody's like, oh, I don't want to take somebody that died of an overdose and all that stuff. So these are very important things. The transplant centers have been making decisions for their patients without the patients even knowing. And it's a big burden for me, and that's why I come up with these emojis, and I try to explain to the patient why it is important and understanding some of this, because as you go to stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even if you got a marginal kidney, you could come from stage 5 back to stage 3 instead of coming all the way over here with a live donor. But the advantages that you have in terms of like reduction in your cardiac events, cardiovascular mortality, congestive heart failure, as you can see, go down significantly. And we have better drugs now than we had 20 years ago, which basically would prevent us from going back into stage 5. So these are things you have to kind of like factor in. There's now like better hepatitis C drugs, so you could get a kidney from a hep C donor even if you didn't. The guy that did the pig transplant in NYU, he's a heart transplant himself, and he got a kidney from a hepatitis C donor. While he's hep C negative, he started taking hep C therapy. So these are things that patients need to know, dialysis units need to know. So those are things that kind of like I want you guys to go know and spread the word about this. A couple updates on the policy. The biggest thing was the eGFR formula you heard about earlier in the main session. And that was that when we created these formulas in 2002, that was the best thing that happened because we were able to stage kidney disease. But we didn't realize the accuracy of those formulas. And as you heard this morning, the folks that got impacted were African Americans. So these formulas basically, if you were African American, it sort of overestimated your function and you were thought to have better kidney function. And because you can only accumulate wait time if your GFR is less than 20, these folks' formulas always showed them about 20, so they never made it to the transplant centers. And as a result, I'm so happy to report that for the first time there was people got letters for the past 2 years. They got letters that if they'd been registered as African Americans and they could provide documentation that the GFR was more than 20 with a race-inclusive formula that went down to less than 20 with a race-neutral formula, they would get credit for whenever that test had been done. And it made a lot of news. It was sort of it's funny, like you have a Trump hush money trial. I couldn't get it. I could get it. So it is a bias test that resulted in a lot of people not getting a transplant. But as a consequence of this variation, about 14,000 African American kidney transplant candidates have their weight type modified, and about 2,800 of them have already received a transplant. This is like an amazing thing, and where we were able to fix something that at that time, like 2002, when these formulas were created, had not factored in the implication. You've heard about the Congressional Act that happened last year. As a consequence, I had, just in case, I'm making sure I got all the presidents in here. I had Trump, I have Biden here. Don't get mad at me, I got both of them covered. But this has resulted in a modernizing initiative, which is basically holding UNOS, which was the only entity that had a contract for 40 years, accountable. And this is going on so fast, I can't even keep track of. Every day there's something coming out. They're actually looking at the wait list. They're trying to figure out why folks have not been referred. If they've been referred, the transplant centers are being engaged in how long it's taking them to transplant. This was just yesterday or day before yesterday. A new sort of model called the IOTA was added on, which basically, how do we maximize deceased donor? Transplant centers are being looked at. And again, this is so important for you to know. If you're listed at a transplant program, yeah, they might have excellent outcomes, but how many kidneys do they take that are like harder to place? If they're like being very selective, are they rejecting kidneys without you being involved in it? And yeah, I'm throwing my community under the bus, but this is where I really feel that we haven't really done a good job in using kidneys and having the patients decide. I could have a 75-year-old that basically just wants a kidney for 5 years, and I can't tell you, Southern California, we have so many folks that are from the first question, can I travel to my country? They haven't seen their family in 10 years. And I was just telling an administrator because I'm like, I just visualized that I had something to do with this guy getting a transplant and going back to their country and their folks waiting for them at the airport because they haven't seen their loved one in 10 years and 12 years. So these are things that the patient should be asking, not the transplant center. The transplant center should not be declining kidneys for everybody based on what they think is the outcome of that kidney. So again, these things are coming in, and these things can't come fast enough. That's my patient who was on the LA Times because of how complicated it is to get on a transplant list, how convoluted it is, and to your point, how hard it is, because as transplant centers, we're gauged by our 1-year outcomes and 3-year outcomes. So if we do get a patient that is getting recurrence, we get dinged for it. Like, unless some of these things are taken off our shoulders, we can't, and this poor guy can't get listed anywhere. He finally was able to get listed with me, but then he doesn't have a contract, his insurance doesn't have a contract with me. So, these are things that need to change. These are things that will change, and this is the executive order where 80% of the new folks will be on home hemodialysis or preemptive transplant. We'll be doubling the number of transplants. And this is what dialysis units are starting to get. This is from my fellow who was all panicked out because his transplant rate in the dialysis facility is low, and they're going to like have payment cuts. And that's the only way it should be. You heard what a life of a nephrologist is. He's so busy, managing dialysis patients that he can't spend time preventing people from getting. So until the model change where physicians get paid to like prevent them from going on dialysis, some of these things are not going to. And this is sort of like where we are actually going. So we need to list as quickly as we can until all those things become a reality. Obviously, you want to make sure. Again, like I said, I'm a visual guy, so I've made this for my patients. These are the things you need. These are the things that you should immediately try to get done, because sometimes dialysis patients fall in this group where nobody knows who owns them. They don't see their primary care physician as much, so they end up not being the cancer screen and all that stuff. Same thing with women. Oh my God, it was an act of God to get like that. I didn't know what to put for a pap smear. They're like, oh, this is not. So anyway, I was able to get it, but just to get my folks who have 5th grade education, these are the things that I need from you. So we can't. I'm always running into all these things. Again, this is where a patient gets sent over to us, but we're dependent on all these things. So as a patient, advocate for yourself, try and get these things done as quickly as you can so we can put you on the list. Couple things about the diagnostics. There's only 3 things that we can look at: blood, urine, and the biopsy. So there's a lot of things that are going on, which I'm going to talk about later in the post-transplant session. But these are sort of like the main ones that have really changed. And the cell-free DNA, which is like if you donated a kidney to her, we now have the ability to do a blood sample to see what percentage of the DNA is yours that is in her. So if there's a kidney injury happening, that DNA level can go up and tell us that something's going on before the creatinine goes up. And again, how do we basically detect injury before? And the genetic testing, I'm a big fan of genetic testing. I've been doing it for about when the tests came out, and I've uncovered so many of those things. I'm going to talk about it later in the afternoon. I'm going to talk about this later in the afternoon too, but does anybody know about the Carious test? So just like the DNA from a donor, now anytime we have an infection, the DNA of that bug is in there. So we've always traditionally relied on blood cultures and urine cultures, which can take 5 days, 7 days. Some of those slow-growing bugs can take weeks. This is a DNA test, just like the cell-free DNA from the donor. This is an infection, and it screens for about 1,000 pathogens. It is only an in-house test, so God forbid your patient gets admitted and you're trying to rule out, make sure you ask them, can we do a Carious? Within 1 day, you are able to get the result of what the pathogen is. And it is just amazing. I've loved it. In terms of the HLA matching, that is advancing as well. It used to be we had a very crude concept of self versus non-self, but we're realizing there are all these other places that we can improve the matching. At the same time, the rejection rates are low, so we don't want to deny people transplants, but it is good to know what the conventional mismatch might be. So if 2 people are mismatched, they look the same, but when we do the eplet matching, this one is 12, that one is 7. This may have an advantage where we're doing paired donor exchanges, where if you were to donate to your loved one, you might want to go into a match where that other donor is better matched to your recipient, so you might be able to get. So again, kind of like a dating matching profile. This is a little bit better HLA matching. I'm going to skip this. This is again an advancement on that. You have it is amazing how many therapies are coming out. It's beyond, it's a lecture in itself, but that is the good news where you should, be aware of all these things that have come out, including the genetic disease. Quick story, I have like this 27-year-old African-American girl. She's always been called a diabetic as the cause of her kidney disease. And then I basically said, something's not right. She's never had retinopathy. She doesn't have neuropathy. So I'm like, I'm going to just send a genetic test. And it comes back as Hatter mutation, which is a hereditary amyloid. And I'm like, wait a minute, she had a kidney taken out. She had like a mass. So I called that hospital, which is like a small diddly hospital in LA. I'm like, hey, can I you have an entire kidney. Can you check? I don't think this was diabetes. He's like, oh yeah, we fired that pathologist. That wasn't a good pathologist. But I'm like, oh, okay, but can you check? He's like, fine. And they called me back. He says, yeah, you're right. It is amyloid. So then I had to tell her mom, I'm like, hey, you have a cardiomyopathy. So again, there is RNA interference therapy for that. Again, importance of you have to be not just labeled as what your disease is. You have to advocate for yourself because some of us are not good at it. Okay, to conclude, I usually come to these, I come in my aviator sunglasses, but I have done that so many times, I feel like a comedian that's saying the same joke again and again. The point I'm trying to make is when Top Gun 1 came out is when ACE inhibitors came out. And nothing happened in our space until Top Gun 2 came out. It's like, as a conspiracy theorist, I want to say that Tom Cruise, the guy doesn't age because you don't want to see what happened to that one when you compare the two pictures of them together. This guy doesn't age. How do we get these kidneys not to age? And I am happy to tell you guys, I had to throw in a y'all in Texas. So it is good. We're going to be good. You guys are going to be good. There's a lot happening. The space is just busting and bulging at the seams and with all the things that are coming in. And I'm happy to take any questions.
It's a question, more so a statement that these new patients, the innovation with these April 4th testimonies, I think, would you agree, it sounds like the follow-up should be there. This is only May 4th, and I think they can be a success, but year after year, they should be followed up and monitored. Don't you agree?
Oh, 100%, 100%. It's too soon for us to think about it. Congress is still debating about insulin. That was discovered 100 years ago or something like that, right? So some of these things, I don't think it's going to come. These are good. For me, it is like an advancement in science, which to some extent our specialty had so much inertia, and we just it just percolated at every level. And you can and we didn't have nothing. We didn't have any therapies. We'd just say, like you heard this morning, I'll come back in 3 months. We'll see if it works and all that stuff. So there, a little bit of the mindset has to change, where we have to kind of. I mean, of course, everything has to be done safely, and but 100%. It's too soon.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
At what point do they wait? Just
For the video.
Oh, for the video. Okay. Her GFR is what, 21 now?
21.
21. At one time it was as low as 14, and we were recommended for a kidney transplant. Went through everything else approved, whole 9 yards. Took about, I guess, 6 to 9 months total for everything. And now we're running into an issue where apparently she is not sick enough because her GFR has gone up just a little bit. Is there a baseline where they will do a transplant?
So as you saw on the goals until 2025, is like 80% of them have to be preemptive transplant. That means folks should not even have gone on to dialysis. We should have been able to get them a transplant even before they went on dialysis. Right. And that's the whole purpose. So that's why it is so important. That is so important for you to know your transplant center. What percentage of them did a preemptive transplant? So many times, and again, I sort of, I'll tell you more on the side, but I really do believe that these are things that sort of it's kind of it's like a secret within the transplant programs and all that stuff. Nobody knows, how many organs were offered to that program that got declined that some other center used, right? If I pass a kidney in the middle of the night and somebody else had a great outcome, that means I made a wrong decision, right? So you have to be able to look at all that, and it's not all public information, right? So you have to see what percentage of that, because then you want a multi-list. And I think I will just, because that's in my second lecture, but I will quickly go because I don't know if you'll be here the next time. But there is this website called the Transplant Coach. It used to be called TX Multi-Listing. It was made by a transplant patient, and it was just the most amazing site because you would put in your zip code, your blood group, and it would basically tell you where the shortest wait time is, okay? And I guess they got a little greedy. I actually even sent them a message. So now you have to fill up an application and all, which is still good. But as you can see in California, all these transplant centers are red. I mean, my transplant center does have the highest transplant. I don't want to jinx it right now. I've just been at the new one for about a year and a half. But this will tell you. This website will tell you if you are looking for a transplant. And again, it's now called Transplant Coach. It used to be called. If you put TX Multi-Listing, it will redirect you to this. But go ahead and fill up the form. It'll tell you the shortest wait times. It'll get you there faster. I'll go back to my presentation one. Sorry. We'll just leave this. This looks cool. Yes.
Can you be registered at multiple transplants?
Yes, you can. Yes. Yes. You absolutely can. Here is a hero, guys. For those of you who don't know, stand up, man. Come on. He was at our. Yeah.
I have a question for you.
By the way, he's a celebrity. He has like an Instagram following and all that stuff. He's won a lot of titles. So yeah.
Doc, what are the different types of transplantation? So, being first diagnosed, I only thought that it was either from a live donor or a deceased donor. There's now more options for people to donate. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
The two parts of it, the live donor could be a live related or sort of somebody that doesn't know you. And because of the paired exchanges that have happened to kind of match better or cut down the barriers, for example, let's say I wanted to donate to you, but I was blood group A and you were incompatible, then we could swap around with the donor. So that's one.
Family done that.
You're paired. That's paired exchange, right? But in addition to that, we have the deceased donors, and to some extent, they were looking at the quality of the kidney. So some of them are just like mathematical formulas, the same way that we had like these GFR formulas and all that. So that's supposed to assess the quality of the kidney, and a lot is changing on that because it's a very subjective assessment. I get a lot of kidneys from Arizona. I have to have, like in the middle of the night, go up and look who the pathologist was, what their credentials were. Should I just trust it? Because it doesn't make sense. Creatinine on admission was 0.7. So there has to be somebody that is a functional insomniac that is looking out for you because all these things happen in the middle of the night. So to answer your question, there's like these grades of the quality of the kidney emojis that I saw you. So at what point do you say, you know what, I don't want to wait for that happy kidney because I'm going to have suffered so many consequences of dialysis that I'm better off taking a kidney that will put me in stage 3, but I have a SGLT2 or Corindia and I have all these other things that I could be put on that I might not slip back into needing a kidney transplant right away and all that stuff. So to answer your question, most of this is because like I will show you my phone, like the kidney offers that I have, and from Little Rock, Arkansas, because I leave my filters open. So you have to know what percentage of kidneys have been imported at your transplant center. Nobody asked these questions, right? So these are things that and your donor was amazing, so you were lucky, and that are you here? Remember you said that it is important in trying to figure out the sort of the anatomy of your transplant program that you're listed at. But for sure you can multi-list, and that's the website.
Question for you over here. To kind of piggyback on this family down here. If there's a live donor ready to go, or potentially more than one, why are lists necessary? Or is that simply a wait time? Or, I thought the list had to do with deceased sort of transplant.
You have to be put on a list to even get a live donor transplant.
Right.
They have to keep a track of, it's like a national
Right.
database, so you have to be UNOS listed, because otherwise you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know who's transplanting, how it is transplanted. So you have to list with the central entity that keeps a track of all the transplants that's happening in the United States.
So like in their case, when you said your wife wasn't sick enough for one, but there's a live donor ready to go, and at some point she will be sick enough for one, why do they
And I
wait?
already have that.
So why do they wait? What was their reason?
My GFR went up from a 14 to
Oh.
an 18 for a while, now 21.
So you hit 20 again, so they think that maybe it won't digress again.
Right.
And we've even been told by somebody that we need to be on dialysis before they'll consider us.
See, these,
Okay, so how do we advocate against that?
well, that's what we're here for,
Yeah.
right? That's what we're here for. That's why this is my first time.
By the way. No, I'll put it out there. I'm putting it out there.
Yeah, and these are the things that we have kind of gotten into this space because we really didn't have advocates. We didn't really have. This was the disease of the poor, the lower socioeconomics of the world. You just
Why do programs put people on dialysis? Why do some programs believe that's the way?
It's I don't know that anybody does. I mean, I would love to debate them, but sometimes they're like, oh, they need to understand. Preemptive transplants are the hardest transplants because they didn't know what life was on dialysis. They're like, not taking it. I don't know. There's like, people take it for granted if they bypass dialysis, which I don't believe. Which I don't. I mean, like, I'm not in a position to make that decision. I just didn't do a good job in explaining to the patient, right? I think it's, anyways, it's sort of a little bit of, I don't know, art, a little bit of between the patient, understanding where this is coming from.
Using that 20 level, the eGFR 20, that's probably inconsistent now with the medications like the SGL2s that we're using, because it will automatically raise it. But how artificial is that? We don't know if that's really a good, healthy raise.
No. The
And
only,
so,
yeah.
Well, so why is it that platform in the nephrology and transplant community can't be raised higher? You're healthier at a 30 than you are at a 20. And the more you slip below the 20, the more difficult it is for you to get a transplant and be
Absolutely.
healthy going into a transplant. There's got to be dialogue to stop this leveling of 20. Everybody does, they'll transplant you at 20.
100%. 100%. I mean, I guess from our standpoint, what it basically comes down to is supposedly there are not enough organs, which I disagree with. Which I disagree with. Because as I mentioned, I'm at CAC-USC, but I also am at Providence St. Joseph's Hospital, which had done 15 transplants until I got there to help them.
Yes.
We've done 170,
Yes.
but that doesn't mean nothing. You have to look at what my denominator was. If somebody's doing 200 transplants, but they have 2,000 people on the list, while somebody is doing 50 transplants, but they had only 60 people on the list, you have to look up the transplant rate. How many people did they transplant, and what was the denominator? Because UCLA has 2,000 people on their list, or 1,500. CAC, where I'm at, which I built, has 1,500. At Providence, we had 300 people, and we have done 170 transplants. Okay, so what I'm
standard.
yeah,
standard.
there's no standard. So what it comes down to, like, I feel like we have to have some sort of a line in the sand where we can, like, enroll people until it is still a federal, it's run by the CMS, and these things might change again. UNOS is breaking down. I just texted somebody at pharmaceutical. She's like, I'm like, be on the lookout for, like, trying to transplant more. I'll join you guys wherever it is, because this is my passion. I want more people transplanted. Yeah. Clearly something that we've been able to do. I think that's a line in the sand, just because if we took 30, there would be more people. So unless we're able to use these kidneys, you'll listen to this. If this big thing works, you better believe they're going to make the GFR at 60 because they want to transplant everybody after.
That's right. That's right.
I'm keeping track.
Sorry. Thank you.
We'll get you in order. I'm new to this with my daughter. She's not quite there, but I just want to make sure I understand. If a friend or a family member in the match trial, then she does not have to be on the list, or do you have to be on the list no matter what?
You have to be on the list no matter what. That doesn't matter. She will get a transplant, but you have to be enrolled in it. I mean, this is sort of like a way of having, like, an entire sort of assessment of how many transplants happen in the United States. Otherwise, people would just create their own little shops everywhere, and there'd be no accountability. So this is sort of like something that kind of is through the the federal mandate that you have to be certified by UNOS. No, you can't. So you have to be on the list for them to keep a track of.
But if she's a match to someone that we know, it's her kidney, right? Even on the.
Oh yes.
They have to be 20.
Yes.
Correct?
They have to
You
be.
cannot get a transplant unless you reach at least
20 or below.
No, for a live donor transplant, you could do it even above 20.
That's what I really.
Yes,
But,
yes.
but if they won't put you on the
That's
list
right.
till you reach 20, how do you?
You can go on the list. You can be put on the list. You may not accumulate time. But you might be eligible for a perfectly matched kidney.
The time is for deceased.
The time is
Essentially.
yes
The time you're referring to is for.
for the deceased.
Okay.
Yeah, the live donor is still yours.
Wow.
You need to be a really great advocate for us out here. As a transplant surgeon, you have the opportunity to get in front of a whole lot of your peers and tell them this stuff is not right.
Yeah,
You need mandatory standards. In other words, to look at what is good for the patient.
So
You need to be
yeah, no,
you're
you better
very
believe that
good.
I
I know you are.
I-
We need people like that.
You know what it is? It's like people. So I went to the American Transplant Congress meeting, all right? So I'm sitting over there, and I'm listening to all these people talk about how to increase the transplant rate, and I'm looking at their numbers. I'm like, they have the least transplant rates, okay?
Exactly.
So I walked off. I was like, what I should be. So while I'm walking off, a transplant surgeon who's now at Walter Reed, he used to work with me. They used to hate me because I was pushing for, like, more and more transplant. He's like, dude, you should be the one doing that lecture up over there. I'm like, what do you think I'm walking off, man? This is the problem. So it is a very hard group to break into. It is like, it's like just people with, so, yeah, so what's funny is, like, there's, like, this WhatsApp chat groups. And then I was like, and I'm always, like, instigating. I'm like, there's no shortage, because the people that are, like, out there looking, oh yeah, we will investigate your program if you have passed on people. I'm like, wait a minute. You guys are, I'm getting these kidneys from New York, so nobody in New York is using them. And then you're going to tell me that I should give it to the person who's on, like the first person on the list. And you have to have some sort of a sort of like an assessment with patient input. Like, I have to tell you, I might get you a kidney, I could get you a kidney transplant. I don't think it's going to last 3 years or 5 years. Are you okay with that? If you tell me I'm okay with that, then we do it, right? It shouldn't be that I have to.
100%.
Right now, your transplant programs are the ones that are making the decisions in the middle of the night, and that's going to change. Some of these things are going to change. And yes, sir.
Okay. If we, sorry, I have
Yeah.
an order going.
Okay, I'm going to let you.
Okay, I'll handle it. So during the diagnostic stage of my daughter's kidney disease, they put her on Cellcept, which she couldn't function on Cellcept. So she got COVID, nearly died. Her question, she's in another breakout session. Her question is there any advancement in the post-transplant medications to keep you healthy that do not require immune suppressant drugs?
Yes, I'm going to talk about it. It's really early in its stages. It's called tolerance, and it's sort of like where, especially in live donors, there's very small groups where they're trying to do sort of like a bone marrow transplant at the same time, so that the immune system is completely replaced to think that the cells are.
She's heard about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, very early stages. We're not there yet. Would have to be as a part of a clinical trial, and I had, just like I had for the pig kidney. There's like some centers.
What might happen if she just refused any immunosuppressive drugs after she gets my kidney?
If she refuses,
If she just doesn't take the immunosuppressive
well, there's a good
drugs?
chance she's gonna reject.
Okay.
And then why would she leave you with one kidney? And if
And not do
yeah. I mean, I'm a big advocate for live donors as well, because as you saw, the first one's just like 60, 70 years ago, right? Yeah, they will be alive, but I don't know. Is it going to impact the vitamin D? I don't want to cut down organ donation, but there's still a lot what we don't know, as you heard. What we don't know, we don't know. So like we're getting to that point where folks have donated a kidney 50, 60 years ago, and they're alive, and now we can say, are they anemic? Do they have vitamin? Are they more prone to fractures? So there's a lot of uncertainty in some of these things. Yes, ma'am.
Just a really quick comment on doing it. When my daughter got a transplant almost 5 years ago, we live in Ohio, and I called a few programs. They all wanted her to go on dialysis or remove her kidneys and go on dialysis before. But so we went to Pittsburgh UPMC, and they were big into preemptive, and she had a preemptive, and she's doing awesome.
There you go.
5 years
Yeah.
out.
No dialysis. She was
5
at
years
12% function, and she made it just before.
Yeah.
And so anyway, my
Okay,
question
can I ask
was-
you a question? Where was this? Where were these people that were wanting? This is Ohio?
Yeah, Ohio.
Is this like a constant theme, man?
They did that to me. They took my native kidneys out and then put me on dialysis and then transplanted me, my very first kidney too.
Preemptive works. There's no doubt
Yeah.
preemptive works. And yeah, we don't have enough. It's a reason we don't advertise the fact that you can be a very preemptive donor and be healthy. My brother gave me a kidney 37 years ago. So I can tell you that his function is just as normal as his other kidney and me.
Yeah.
But he had the opportunity. I'm telling you, there's no education and there's no emphasis from anywhere about living donation. It's all either move to dialysis or let's get you on a list. Nobody says, let's look at transplant first and then work from there.
But my other
It's
quick
very
thing-
close, right?
Yeah.
With the bioartificial kidney, how long do you think it'll take for it's like a viable option? Like how many years do you think?
Well, it's kind of like hard to say because, I guess the Congress got a little sidetracked with TikTok, but, some of these things have to
That's the point.
a lot of this is, that has to be advanced. I would, the Singapore company is very close to, I would say that in the next few years, I would say within the 5 years, I do believe that some of these things would happen. The kidney project is UCSF in San Francisco. You can keep a track of them, and then the other company that I mentioned. But you could contact them and see just to kind of get a more.
Just curious down
Yeah.
the road. But then between that and the xenotransplant, which one do you think is better? And then immunosuppression wise, if patients had one or both of those, either one of those, would they still need immunosuppression medication?
This is like fantasy football. I'm like guessing this all out, but I think what it comes down to, it will be like everything. We've gone in nephrology or transplant where everything was like a protocol. Everybody basically had to be on the same thing, which I always disagreed with, because I want to individualize it, because I don't know how somebody is going to take immunosuppression. I can't give everybody 1 gram of CellCept. They're not going to be able to talk. Heck, I get 2 beers, I get like, oh, I'll tell you all my secrets. And my cousin can drink a ton and nothing happens to him. So obviously, we metabolize how, so it would be based on so many factors, like, if how would they do an immunosuppression? Is this bioartificial kidney going to give me just the same amount? Is the next pig transplant going to have like some sort of a crazy infection? So it's a bit futuristic in trying to be able to give you an exact answer, but I think it is moving at a really fast rate. So we will have some of those answers in a couple NephCures.
Just tell them
Yeah, just to build on with our little experience that we're going through again. And it does seem like everything, like they're just following a protocol. It doesn't feel individualized at all. It's like they're going down a checklist and asking us questions and having us do things that are completely not pertinent to our situation with having a life in them. And when you go through an experience like they're just checking the boxes, and what's very frustrating is we have 2 separate care teams. Okay, we have 2 separate coordinators.
Exactly.
One hand does not know what the other one's doing. She has to call her care team to force my care team to answer a question that I have, and vice versa. And it's just a merry-go-round. Okay? Something needs to be done to streamline this process. It's got to be better with living donors, because if I go to work tomorrow and get hit by a bus, okay, then all this time, hooing and hawing, she could have had my kidney, and now I'm dead. Okay, so not to say that anybody's less important. Everybody has a chance to live, but the thing is, so much could happen if you are fortunate enough to have a living donor, that should be really worked. I mean, like you were saying, this time, you need to advocate for that. Yeah, that's all.
No, absolutely. And just to kind of like, not to defend it, but they do try to keep it separate, church and state, because you obviously, but there's some situations where, the dad might be forcing a child to, and all that stuff. So we have to give, we have to give them a medical out or something. There's been times when, like, somebody wanted to, were feeling guilty that they wanted to donate to their dad, but it might be a genetic condition. They just become a young parent and all that stuff. So we have to give them a medical out. We have to say, hey, if you don't feel comfortable, we'll find a medical reason, so that it doesn't go. I mean, you're obviously in a different situation, but we have seen other situations as well where we don't know what their disease is. There's a chance that they might, but they want to donate, but they're like a little worried. They just had a child. So there's just so much more that goes into the making of this hot dog.
Just to add on to his coordinator told us we were a match. My coordinator still doesn't know anything. So that's the issue that we're running into.
Yeah.
And I talked to her yesterday, and she basically told me I was just a little too healthy.
Unquote.
Just healthy.
Just a little too healthy.
Sorry, just to piggyback onto the bone marrow transplant or cell transplant conversation, I'm hoping to donate to your brother. How far out who has primary FSGS, you think autoimmune related, which has a higher reoccurrence, of my understanding. So I've been reading about the stem cell. Do you suspect that will all come together in the next 5 years as well as the
Well, there have been, unfortunately, there was one company that was working on it, and they kind of halted their trial after there was a graft versus host disease. The other company is the NephCure trial that they were in it. It's sort of like out of Stanford. I might as well just show you. In case you're not here later, I'll just...
There's a boy here that got...
Yeah, the Stanford case.
Yes.
And then the UCLA, it happened as well between them.
UCLA, I don't know UCLA did it yet, but sorry, I'm gonna go through my other presentation. Somewhere on here it is. I'm curious.
General has done.
Stanford.
We need to comment about that. Yeah, the pediatric Stanford study and their case, and then also UCLA position did it with, as a result of doing it.
Yeah, these are the ones that have been published. If you wanna like maybe take a look at it and all that, but so there's sort of like these are kind of like the ones, and you can just look some of these up and all that. But again, it is kind of early in the game, so I don't know. I would just go conventional for now. I mean, unless you want to be part of a clinical trial, knowing that it may not completely.
And that happens post-transplant though, correct?
That happens at the same time.
Oh, I thought I read a year or two later people were coming back and donating on their okay. I thought that's too.
Yeah, there's conditioning that goes in.
Radiation goes along with that too.
Yes, yes. You have to wipe out the bone, the immune system to put it back.
It's not a real easy
It's
deal.
not,
Yeah.
is it tough?
It's very tough.
Yeah.
3 years.
Absolutely. And that radiation, you know, no, there.
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
For you in reference to kidneys that are already transplanted. You said something about regeneration and stuff. Is there some research being done to help prolong and help those kidneys last longer, and the recipients, the immunosuppressants that that potentially give?
Sure. So the one that I was showing, the slide that I showed you was looking at kidneys that were procured, had injury to heal them, and then transplant them. But there is a ton that is happening on the kidneys that are already implanted and may not have, what we call a graft in distress or something to protect it from getting worse. A lot of that is the diagnostics, which is kind of like the next lecture, the diagnostics that are out there, both at the level of the DNA that I was mentioning, trying to figure out, because it does help us rule out rejection very good. So everybody should have that test done at some point. And then if you did have a biopsy, we have better tests to look at what might be the predominant disease that might be inflaming the graft and all that stuff. So we have a better idea of why stuff is happening, parallel with the fact there's a lot of therapies that have started to come out, based on, for like diabetes, for hypertension, for IgA, that we're sort of incorporating, which I do believe is going to help us keep these kidneys there longer.
But there's nothing that specifically helps that improve.
Not specifically to transplant. There are some trials. There's one that is looking into the diabetic kidney disease where they inject stem cells into the graft, but they're having a hard time enrolling because SGLT2 inhibitors and all these things came out. So as of now, nothing that we can inject directly into the kidney or something that would basically kind of reverse injury.
Thank you.
Chef.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Hope. I feel like you've been